Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash, as well as the season premiere of Arrow. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I included time to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of The Flash, you can skip to what I had to say about the season premiere of Arrow. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Flash. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we're picking up where last week's episode left off, where we had, obviously the Monitor's message and saying that Barry has to die if he wants to save billions of lives. And now, obviously that's floating through Barry's mind and it's so interesting when he kind of explains everything, because that news report has always been kind of a guiding post of this is kind of direction my life. At the very least, it kind of was some guide of where to go, but also what to avoid. And obviously it's changed quite a few times over the course of the series, just because different things have happened to kind of change it. But now it's in the stages of being something so close. Before it was something so far away, because at least he was at the very least I thought hey, if I would disappear, maybe I'm somewhere out there, maybe in the multiverse or something like that. But now it's no, I definitively know I'm dead. And there's no coming back for that. And it's obviously Iris is no, we got to find another way. But it's because we don't know what the Monitor is saying is true. Which it would also explain why the Monitor was willing to do what Oliver said of let me sacrifice. It's my payment would be whatever he offered the Monitor, which, is his life, in exchange for Kara and Barry's, just because they would be so important. The fact that the Monitor would be so willing to do that makes you think they are obviously going to play a key role in this crisis that's kind of been flowing through, everyone's mind for a while now. So there's that whole situation, which obviously Barry and Kara are still unaware about what Oliver did. So there's that side of things. It still surprises me that they're angling that. I figured okay, Oliver, sure. It never crossed my mind that Barry would have to sacrifice himself. That was just kind of, like I said, that was kind of a surprise, them kind of dropping that on us last episode. But regardless, so to kind of figure out how to really go about understanding the situation, they have to find out, Barry plans to travel to the day after he disappears, after the course of the crisis. So he aims for December 11th, and he tries to go there, but there's a barrier of antimatter that stopped him. Luckily, he's a speedster, because apparently if he was any normal person, that would have wiped him from existence, which it still could even as a speedster, but because it's healing and everything. So that's interesting. So he goes to the one person that could help him understand all of this, and that's Jay Garrick on Earth 3. Which is interesting, because Earth 3 is that Earth we've been to. Well, I'd say at this point, Earth 2 is probably the one we've been to the least, because at least it's not the longest amount of time, but I feel we go to Earth 3 a little more frequently than we do Earth 2. But regardless, it's kind of interesting, in many different regards, because he's got a new lady in his life, and that new lady in his life is Barry's mom's Earth 3 doppelganger, which is interesting because it's I immediately, and it kind of gets a little romantic, maybe this is me just romanticizing it a lot more. And I think they might read into that is the fact is that even on a different Earth where things play out differently, the world's a bit different and stuff like that, a lot of things are different. Yet these two still manage to find their way to each other. It's like Barry and Iris. It was just meant to be. So it's that kind of a situation. I thought that's actually kind of super adorable when you think about it. But essentially, Jay has been monitoring this thing too. Antimatter is popping all over the place. It's not just an Earth 1 thing. This is popping up all across the multiverse. This isn't just about Barry's Earth. This is about every Earth in the multiverse kind of being caught up in whatever this crisis is that's coming. And Barry and Jay, they end up hooking him up to a machine that basically, it was interesting because basically, even, there's no way for him to just get around the antimatter barrier that's there, when he's trying to time travel. But he can send his consciousness through it, which I'm okay, that's interesting, because it kind of there's a TV show on Netflix called Travelers. They have a very similar thing where you time travel with your mind instead of your body. It was kind of, it's very different, but it's kind of along the same vein. And I thought immediately they were the moment they brought up time traveling your consciousness, I'm oh yeah, the Tell system from Travelers. If you're unfamiliar with Travelers, that won't mean anything to you, but still, it's a very interesting time travel show. I recommend you check it out. It's really good in my opinion. But nevertheless, it's going on a huge tangent. But Barry, kind of pushes through it, and it's not just his Earth's future that he sees. He's literally seeing, it's billions of outcomes, essentially. It is about his particular Earth, but, well, I mean, I don't know. We saw it focus on one Earth, but who's to say, like, what we didn't see all on screen, what could have been off screen of him seeing every place all over the multiverse. But he saw billions of outcomes about how things would be different. And every time it ended with people he cares about dying, including Iris. And the only time it didn't end that way was when he died. And him running and kind of like being ripped apart like that heavily reminds me of Young Justice. The whole how Wally's story ends up playing out, at the very least when that's season 2 of Young Justice. It's a very similar thing of kind of like that. So I don't think it's just, I don't know, because I'm about to say, is it pure death or is it like being wiped from existence death? It's hard to say. I think it's probably more so wiped from existence, and there's no necessarily bringing you back. It kind of reminds me of, I forgot, I'm already blinking on their names, but they're not clones, but those time creations that you're able to make a copy of yourself. Like Barry used it to kind of fight and defeat Zoom. Obviously that kind of circled back into like the whole Savitar conversation, because one of them ended up becoming Savitar. So it's one of those things. Like I said, I'm not remembering the name off the top of my head, but it kind of reminded me of kind of like season 2's finale, how one of them kind of burned himself out trying to deal with all of that, fighting Zoom and everything. So like it kind of reminded me of that. Which at that time I made reference to Young Justice, in particular the Wally West situation as well. So we kind of bringing that back in this regard too. And the sad thing is, almost like Barry's kind of like broken by this, because I've seen billions of outcomes, and the only way this all ends is if like everyone being saved is if I die, which obviously Iris isn't willing to accept that. And obviously, that conversation with Joe, you can always love those conversations, because Joe always gives Barry this certain perspective of like, there's times when, when he was a beat cop, he was like, I was scared, but I got back out there the next day because I had this badge. It's the same thing as your emblem. What it represents, the fact of the matter is that basically there's a job to do. We got to do good in the world. And the fact of the matter is, we know that we could end up dying out there, and us accepting that isn't a form of us giving up. It's a form of resilience, proving that no matter, even if we know that we might die, that this might be our end, the fact is that we go out there every day and face it anyway is proof of our resilience, so it's not giving up. So I thought it was kind of an interesting perspective. Obviously Joe's giving him this advice, not knowing everything. I'm actually curious to see if Joe ends up changing his advice later on when he eventually finds out the truth, because obviously Team Flash doesn't know about this crisis and everything, and in particular what this means for Barry. So that's something it's kind of interesting. It all ties into this episode too, because like this episode, there's a metahuman that's being, tried for a murder. And so obviously all the evidence points that she did it, because she's kind of been a, continuous criminal. She's kind of done petty theft stuff, but her powers are like connected to radio waves, so she can control them. And the fact of the matter is, because her powers are close to what happened to this particular victim, and on top of that, there was a witness to it, so it's like all the evidence points to her. But Cecile, using her power, she's got that that empath ability, which is kind of like, there's definitely something there. Like obviously she's not guilty, so she kind of swings things to kind of give her an opportunity, for there to be a chance to clear her name. So I thought that was kind of a pretty nice aspect to it. And so Ralph and Iris work with her to figure this whole situation out, but then they find Allegra at a crime scene with the witness dead at her feet. It's like, all right, this doesn't look good. And Ralph's like, we're just going to talk, and she uses her radio waves to burn his face, which super sucks. Luckily, he is a metahuman, plus he's got the whole being an elongated man situation, so that helped. And that could have just easily been his face melted. So it was like a very, very, very bad sunburn. So, but obviously it kind of puts Cecile in this situation of like, okay, so I gave you a chance, but I don't want, now it's like, I believed you, but obviously who's behind this, but you're not willing to listen. So it turns into a whole complicated thing of like, because she's stuck, like, well, it's because she believes in her power, she believes what she's feeling, and she knows there's something here. But obviously Joe is kind of like, no, all the evidence is saying this, you need to kind of slow down. But the fact of the matter is, because now she's starting to feel like, well, you can trust your gut, but I can't trust my abilities, or you're telling me that there's something more to this, that she didn't do it, that she knows who did it. And she even brought up something. She was like, because Joe, like, she took something Joe said and was like, oh, you think I can't have my abilities and be the DA? He's like, I didn't say that. She's like, yeah, but you're feeling it. So they end up looking into it further, because she actually sits down and talks to Allegra, and it's like, hey, I'm like you. I'm a metahuman. You know, the fact of the matter is, I'm always feeling other people's feelings, so I do know, like, kind of how having the view of a metahuman, where it's just kind of your powers are always kind of active and stuff like that. Because for Allegra, it's like, I'm always constantly seeing the different waves, radio waves, so on and so forth, gamma rays, so on and so forth, you know. And she ends up pointing out the fact is that if she wasn't the only one that was there that night at the particle accelerator. Her cousin was there too. And it turns out Esperanza, what I think is kind of interesting too, it's like, oh, they basically ended up getting similar abilities, which is like that same thing happened with both weather wizards, like the brothers. They were together, so they have very similar abilities. So I think that's kind of interesting. That's never explored a lot, that I guess if two people get powers at the same time because of maybe the blood relation, it automatically, the dark matter kind of brings some connectivity to their abilities, where like they both end up sharing the same one, because Esperanza and Allegra end up having the same one, just like both weather wizards have the same abilities too. Regardless, I just thought that was kind of interesting. Which Esperanza shows up later on, kind of using some badass, not just her abilities, but also some badass skills, because it turns out she was supposedly died 5 years ago, but the fact of the matter is, someone came and got her, and basically has been training her as an assassin, which my mind immediately goes, is that like the Ninth Circle, or are we dealing with some other group entirely? I mean, I guess, you know, with everything that kind of went down in Arrow, that could be a possibility of the Ninth Circle trying to replenish their forces, and maybe they're kind of sprouting out where it's just not like assassins and stuff like that. Well, they are keeping assassins. I mean, that's the only assassin group we really know about. Well, to be fair, there's the League of Shadows Assassins. Grand scheme of things, like where that stands at an Arrow or not, you know, so maybe there's connectivity in that as well. We'll have to wait and see. That's still kind of an unknown factor in all of this. But what's pretty dope is that, like, obviously because she's using radio waves and stuff like that, it moves faster than light, so it means it's moving faster than even Barry's top speed. But Barry, his resilience, you know, he pushes himself, even though he's getting blasted in the face with, you know, with these radio and gamma waves and stuff like that, and it's literally burning at his face. He ends up taking her down, ends up passing out from it. So now they find themselves in this situation of like, yeah, like we were luckily able to take her down, also clear Allegra, but at the same time it's like, okay, so once again, who's this mysterious group that she works for? That's a mystery for another day. There's also that moment I didn't talk about it, but Iris kind of telling, you know, Jay being like, yo, like, so yeah, your new significant other, she looks a lot like Barry's mom, and you're like, wait, what? And because I think even they're kind of picking up like, what are the chances literally on a different Earth we happen to look like two people end up looking just like his parents and end up getting together, which that could be significant later on if they end up having a kid and there's an Earth 3 Barry. That's a whole thing in itself, but you know, so I think that's kind of interesting. So I think we'll be seeing more of them later on in the line. It's actually kind of sweet too when you actually think about it, because Iris never got to know Barry's mom at all, so like kind of knowing her vicariously through another version of herself, you know, I think that's kind of neat. But regardless, so there's all that going down in the episode. There's actually kind of this sweet stuff that's going on with Frost. I think is kind of neat. You know, Frost is trying to live her life, so Cisco and Ralph take her to an art show, which obviously one of those people in the art show is Camila. And so Camila, I said it weird. They basically make it so that her eyes look normal, and the fact is she sounds like Caitlin. That way she doesn't stand out with the whole, like, you know, scary Killer Frost situation. But she's not very receptive to the art thing. She kind of thinks it's lame, because Frost is kind of too cool for school type of mentality. And the fact is that, which is kind of funny when you actually think about it in the grand scheme of things, because I know Daniela Panabaker has talked Danielle Pennebaker, sorry, has talked about the fact that she kind of always felt a bit like a nerd because she was like very good at math and stuff like that. I've heard her kind of talk about that before, so it's just kind of funny. Like she would probably never describe herself as too cool for school type of situations. That's why I just think it's kind of like ironic, just in a grand scheme of the character she has to play in that regard. I'm going on a whole tangent, but nevertheless, even insulting Camilla's work. So there's that, and obviously she's just kind of like, oh, this is going on, I don't care, I got something else to do. It's just so interesting. It's like, can we have Caitlyn back right now? It's like, no, this is my time to kick it, so, but then there's that cute moment, it's like, oh, shouldn't you be checking on Chester? Oh, no, oh, I should, nope. Cisco's like, I already took care of that. But it's like, oh, what are you doing? And she's drawing, and she's like, I get it sucks, I sink. And it's like, no, Cisco's like, don't. If the fact is, because even though she was kind of mocking all that stuff that other people was doing to kind of represent themselves, to kind of bring their art to kind of showcase who they are, kind of bare their soul to the world, she's trying to do the same thing. And maybe that's why she mocked everyone else's stuff, because it's like she doesn't have a way to really, because this is all new to her and everything. Obviously, even Love later on, it's like, oh, she bought all of that artwork by using Caitlyn's credit cards, which is like, yeah, that's okay. That's a whole other situation we got to deal with. But that was kind of neat. I think we'll see her potentially, because she could play with her powers to make something like, because that would be true to her, because she does have her frost ability. I would expect her to kind of do maybe like ice sculptures and stuff like that to be a representation of herself. Maybe that's something we'll see kind of later on down the road. But I do like the fact is that she is taking a more so, like I said, it's just kind of interesting, this whole, like, being a person thing, slowly but surely, kind of step by step, kind of figuring it out. It's actually kind of interesting, too, because Allegra is now working at the Citizen with Iris and Camilla, which I also appreciate. The fact is, it's like, oh, the roster, the Citizen is filling up. Well, I'm curious when we get to see more of Allegra or not. Probably not. It's probably going to be that thing of like, oh, at the very least, she's interning there. So maybe we'll see her pop up. Maybe we won't. We'll see. I think it'll be kind of interesting, but other than that, we also have the Ramsey situation, which he's trying to get more dark matter. The dude kind of screws him out of the deal, but then he attacks the dude with whatever that situation is going on with its other arm. Whatever it is, it seems it's allocated specifically to his arm and hasn't spread to the rest of his body. It appears he kills the dude because he's examining him later on, but it's like some goo has mixed with his blood, but the dude's not dead. So is he I'm curious, like, what it is. Is it like an infection of like, because obviously, like, a lot of this has to deal with death, so I'm wondering, like, is he becoming essentially like death? Because it's like, how did you kill the dude? Because it looks like you just touched him in that one spot, so it's like, do you have a bit of a death touch and then you can bring people back? Are people like subservient? Does it kind of put people in this mindset of like, oh, they're dead and they kind of lost their soul and they're just mindless puppets that eventually you can control type of thing? I don't know. Because obviously, like I said, like, his character, at least what I picked up from the trailer, seems like it stems from like, all of this stems from life and death, and obviously that's a big part of his story, just because he's trying to save people's lives, obviously going about it a little bit in the wrong way with this whole dark matter situation, because that's obviously a complicated thing in itself, but still, it's interesting to see that this, it's still unclear what that whole situation is. I'm interested to kind of dive into that and figure out what the hell that's all about. I also didn't talk about it either. There's a whole Cecile thing of like Cecile wanting to shift from just being the DA to be a representative for metahumans, which she was kind of like, oh, Joe, you're probably going to think it's stupid. He's like, no, it's a good idea, because there's so many metahumans who are represented, because the fact of the matter is so many metahumans kind of fall to the wayside of just because it's like they don't get the proper representation that they should, which is interesting, because like obviously a little bit of parallels between this and Black Lightning to a certain extent. Obviously it's apples and oranges, but still it's just kind of an interesting aspect that I feel like hasn't really been, because like literally they are kind of becoming a class of citizen all on their own, metahumans, and the justice system kind of failing them, because even because of her powers and everything, because Allegra got hers when she was like 15, she still ended up at, was it Iron Heights, wherever they like lock up metahumans, and even like, whoa, really? Like, she was a kid and they still did that. It's like, yeah, but because she posed such danger, quote unquote, as a metahuman, so that's why she kind of got lumped in regardless of age and everything. So I think that's gonna be an interesting story element going forward, kind of seeing Cecile, because I think it fits her more so anyway, because she is more, that empath ability is kicking in more. So I think representing people who, you know, are kind of being blamed for something when it really wasn't them. I think that fits more on the side of, rather than a prosecutor, it does seem more of a defense, lawyer type of thing. So I think it would go more in line. So I think this is a good career shift potentially for her. And I'm really interested to ultimately see where this ends up taking Cecile's story going forward. So in general, I'm very curious to see where all this takes us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to the season premiere of Arrow, a great season premiere. So many great things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. At first, we kind of had that rewind. I'm like, oh, we on Lee and you. I'm like, wait, what's going on here? I was like, because I figured, I was like, wait, we're in something different. Is it not actually not going to be Oliver? But then we see it's Oliver, but he's got short hair. I'm like, wait, what? And also, the Batman helmet mask and an arrow through. It's like, what the hell does that mean? Is that supposed to mean like Batman came to Lee and you to train or something? Like, I don't know what that means. Like, probably someone who's more well versed in comic books, or like, oh my god, that's a reference to that. I don't know. But I was like, I had to rewind. I was like, what's that? What? What does this mean? And so Oliver's, it's like, oh, his mom's meeting up with him again. I'm like, wait, what are we doing? It's like, did Oliver go back in time or something? What's going on? Because he's noticing certain things. We see characters I wasn't expecting to see. I never thought we'd see Malcolm Merlyn again. Because I talked about this a while back. Like, when he quote unquote died in season 5, I thought that was a bluff. I thought he faked his death, but it's like, no, that death stuck. We also see Tommy, because there's no Walter in the picture. His mom, Moira, had married Merlin, Malcolm, and that was kind of interesting to see all the different things that were different. Obviously, Thea is dead in this world and everything. I was like, okay, so I was like, no, so things are different. I'm like, are we on a different Earth? I'm like, what's going on with this? And it turns out, yes, we are. I was like, oh my god, this is so good. Because at first I was like, okay, because that's what I thought this season was going to be. I was like, is it going to be Oliver traversing the multiverse and cutting back to the future stuff? And it seems like that is the case. But nevertheless, oh my god, that's such a good... Dude, I get so excited. He meets, he's dressed up as a Green Arrow, but he crosses paths with another Green Arrow, and Laurel shows up. She's like, what are you doing on my Earth? And then you have, it turns out that Adrian Chase is this world's Green Arrow, so it's like, okay. So I guess because Oliver in this universe didn't survive the Queen's Gambit crash, and so he never came back to become the Green Arrow, that never led to him killing Adrian's dad, and so that led to Adrian actually growing up and becoming a hero instead of the villain that he became on Earth 1. So that was interesting, which is interesting too, considering the fact is Laurel kind of went through the same shift of Black Siren. So obviously that's something they're keeping hush between themselves. So it's like, obviously, what are you doing here on this Earth? And it's like, yeah, that's kind of a long story, but it seems like basically the Monitor sent him to this Earth to get a dwarf star thing, but for what reasons he won't elaborate. It's like, the fact is, I'm telling you, kind of should be reason enough, but the fact of the matter is the multiverse is in danger and stuff like that. So it's so interesting because it's like things are kind of grounded yet kind of because I think this is going to be the season that kind of goes nuts with Arrow, because Arrow has, like I said, for the most part, with the exceptions like season 4, because obviously they introduced magic with Damien Dark, but for most part, and obviously with certain elements like people from Earth 2 and some metahumans here and there, has always kind of been grounded and had a little bit of the science fictional element, but it's not as much of a science fictional show as every other show, whether it be Legends, Supergirl, The Flash, Black Lightning. So it's kind of neat to see that science fictional angle really kind of kick up. But it is neat, like I said, to see that things are different, because Oliver's got his, notions about what's going on and everything. So it's like, oh man, there's a Dark Archer. It's got to be Malcolm Merlyn. Turns out it's not Malcolm, because it's actually Tommy. I'm not too surprised, because I was like, it has to be Tommy, because let's not forget, Prometheus from Earth X was actually Tommy, so it's kind of like, it's not that big of a stretch that maybe in another world he was a villain too. Because it seems his motivations are basically what Malcolm's were in, because he never found happiness elsewhere, because for him, he never found, because he found happiness with Moira. They got married and everything, which that never happened in the original, on Earth 1, because she met Walter. So because he found new love in his life, that revenge of losing his wife never consumed him like it consumed Tommy, because it's sad because Thea is dead in this world, but she's alive in Earth 1 because Oliver came out. Like, it's just like this different, how different this world is. It's even, well, to be fair, this is like early days of Arrows, regardless of, like, obviously because he's supposed to have been on Lian for the past 5 years, so it's just kind of interesting to see that Team Arrow is just Adrian and Laurel, just to see that it's that small. Because we end up finding out, like, because it's like, oh, we see Dinah and Renee, I'm like, oh, Renee's like a bodyguard or something, and then like Dinah's still with the cops, but it turns out they're dirty later on because they're both working with Tommy, and it's just, there's so much goodness. And then the fact that Diggle's there, I'm like, and you see Oliver getting happy because it's like, oh man, it's good to see Diggle. And then it's like, oh yeah, actually I let you kind of get away before, but not this time, Oliver. And it's like, wait, what? It's Diggle from Earth 1. I'm like, yes. I'm like, dude. I even love the joke of, like, Adrian's doing the, like, bar jumping thing that Oliver used to do, and he's like, show off, and she's like, are you jealous? He's like, no, more so nostalgic. I love the fit of this place. It seems that me and Adrian have the same taste, which is like, you mean he has the same taste as Felicity because she designed the base and everything. Which I also love the fact that he runs into that lady he thought was Felicity from behind. He's like, oh, where can I find Felicity Smoke? It's like, oh, why would she work in the IT section like that? She's busy all running Felicity Smoke Industries or tech or whatever. And he's like, oh, good for her. And so I love that being a thing of like, oh yeah. Also, it seems like the person running things there is Curtis, happily married and everything. So I thought that was kind of pretty. Because definitely not his husband in Earth 1. Because isn't that the cop he meets? I'm blanking on home dude's name that he met in Star City, which is also interesting too because it hasn't gone through the change of Star City. It is still Starling City, so it's like it's so befitting the time frame and everything, because obviously it's like where this is potentially leading to Oliver's end. We kind of circle back to the beginning and kind of, remix things. And I'm like, I get giddy about it. It kind of reminds me of Once Upon a Time. Like, Once Upon a Time's final season was kind of a soft reboot of the show, but kind of basically taking season 1 and kind of remixing it into like a new story and the whole thing. Like, it's kind of similar to that, and I thought that was so good. I hope we kind of play around with that more. I think we will, just because of everything that we see, but it's like, okay, is that Earth 1? Is that not? That's the big question. But nevertheless, Diggle's kind of like, come on, Oliver. Like, the fact of the matter is I got word from Felicity, like, what's going on. Obviously Felicity kind of informed him about everything. It's like, so what's this about? Some godlike being came to tell you like something's coming. He's like, there's a crisis coming, and he saw my death. So for Oliver, he's accepted it as like, my death is set in stone, like there's no changing it, which obviously, and the beautiful comparisons, because obviously the Flash comes on before this, is the whole thing of like, Barry's literally dealing with the same thing because his death is set in stone too, and it's like, my death is supposed to save everyone. And for Oliver, it's like, my death is meant to save everyone too, so like, I don't want to drag other people in it, because we know Diggle's not around in neither Connor nor John Jr.'s life, which also begs the question, what necessarily happened to Turner if he's not around for Connor to be with Diggle and everything. So that's a storyline I'm curious they're going to touch on, but that begs the question, is Diggle dead? You'd assume he would be if he never came back to his kids, or maybe because time is all over the place, because you don't know what. Because it seemed like, because I'd assume it kind of follows Kingdom Hearts rules. Once again, I'm always referencing Kingdom Hearts, but if you're familiar, like, time works differently in every world. Like, so like, an hour in one world might only be like 30 seconds in another, so it might be that same thing across like the different Earths. So like, maybe he's all on this adventure, and by the time he comes back, it's like, oh, you guys are grown up. Maybe that's what they'll do. Probably not. I would assume the time kind of moves relatively in the same lane, because I think they've tackled that before. I feel like there is a time difference, but I don't know if it's like that great of a time difference. I could be wrong. Like, I feel like I vaguely remember the Arrowverse kind of tackling that, maybe with Flash, but I don't remember. Regardless, it was just so interesting, and obviously, like I said, so many parallels, because it's like you got Tommy having him chained up and everything, which is very similar to when Adrian Chase had him chained up, but Oliver knows everything. It's like, wait, you're doing an undertaking to kind of destroy the Glaze. He's like, how the hell do you know what you know? It's like, it's like, what happened to you on Lian Yu? It's like, what happened to you when I was in hell? It's like, holy crap, dude. But luckily Diggle showed up, and I love him being like, yeah, I put a tracker in your shit. He's like, for real? He's like, no. because it's kind of a similar thing as like when they first met and everything. Like I said, everything's coming full circle. I love it. I also love like Adrian kind of surprised me because it's like even Diggle was like, holy crap. He's like you, Curtis, and Felicity all rolled in one because of like him kind of tracking everything down. And even the whole thing of like suit up and they're looking at each other kind of like, I even love Laurel being like, oh, you brought someone else, a friend with you. He's like, I've been here before. It's like, oh, great. You're here too, knowing he's from Earth 1. I just love it. It's just kind of interesting, like, and I think and I think that's also ultimately a very interesting thing we actually think about it, like, experience-wise. Oliver's kind of been through all these different mistakes because he sees what Tommy's doing. He's like, I literally understand what you're going through. I've literally lost so many people so close to me that you couldn't comprehend and understand because it's like, it'd be this whole crazy thing of like, there's an alternate world. You know, I lost a Laurel, but she came back, but it was a different Laurel. It's actually your Laurel. And just, he lost his mom, but my mom's alive in this world, which is also interesting. I should tackle that too. My recollection from season 2 of The Flash, I mean, to be fair, maybe like time is changing all over the place, but remember his dad was supposedly, I mean, maybe that's something I'm misremembering. That might be something they retconned, but on Earth 2, wasn't Oliver's dad the Green Arrow in that universe? I think that was the case. I could be wrong, but in this universe, Oliver and his dad, probably along with Sarah, potentially died on the Gambit. I mean, we don't know like how much of Earth 2 is, which is kind of crazy when you think about everything at the end, but we'll get to that soon enough. But the whole point I was thinking is, because this is an Oliver who not only had the training on Lian Yu, he's literally had all the fighting experience of all 7 previous seasons of Arrow. So literally, he's had these 12 years. Wasn't that the thing, too, of like, he had, because it's actually been the 12 years. It's not actually been just the 5 years, has it? Wasn't that what they were referencing? Because I think I'm mixing that up, that it isn't just... I don't remember. Because they did reference at one point 12 years. In the grand scheme of things, it's been that for Oliver. But like, I'm curious, were they referencing the fact is actually he's present day... Okay, I'm stupid. I'm so stupid. I apologize because I'm such an idiot because obviously this is Laurel. So like obviously it's 12 years because it's the same. I'm such an idiot. I don't know why it took me so long to grasp that. I'm such an idiot for not grasping that till now. So yeah, it's been 12 years. So like obviously like so much is going to diverge heavily in those 12 years. So it's kind of going back to my point of like the timelines keep up with each other. I'm such an idiot. Regardless, ignore all the stuff about time and stuff like that, but it's still just kind of interesting to know. But obviously Oliver has been through everything that he's been through. So he's gone up against other archers before. So I feel like he has a little more experience. Like Tommy's but I love archer battles just like I love speedster battles, like them running to each other, arrows, and they clink and meet and like that. It's so freaking dope. But obviously Oliver almost easily outmatched because Tommy got super jacked up. Oliver was pretty okay, you know? So there was that situation. And luckily, Oliver was able to kind of talk Tommy away from doing what he did, which is interesting because, you know, obviously Tommy kind of was there for him in a moment similarly enough as well of kind of, you know, it's interesting that in this universe, Oliver was changing Tommy when it's actually Tommy on Earth 1 who helped change Oliver, you know, at the end of season 1 going into season 2. So it's just actually kind of interesting in the grand scheme of things. Actually, and I think that probably feels good for Oliver where it's like, okay, I didn't have to kill my best friend, you know, someone was like a brother to me. Luckily, I didn't have to do that, you know. I thought that was kind of pretty neat, like, you know, showing like, hey, you know, and even Tommy being like, that was actually a good speech. I even love that he took down Dinah and Renee like it was nothing. He was like, yeah, because on my world you had a better teacher because it's like they're so inexperienced. It's like Dinah and Renee from my world kick your asses so easily. But nevertheless, I even love that Adrian's like, you guys are from a parallel world. It's like, how'd you figure that out? He's like, Bruce Wayne. I lost my mind. I was like, yeah. I don't know why I got so ecstatic about that. Which is like, he said Bruce Wayne. He didn't say Batman. Which, because even Oliver in the past, like earlier seasons, had made a reference to Bruce Wayne. Like, everyone knows about Bruce Wayne. Batman's the one that was just kind of considered a legend. So I'm curious in this universe as I mean, like I said, the freaking helmet is there. It's like, what the hell does that mean? Does that mean that Batman clashed with someone? That could have been like a league. Like I said, I kind of get the feeling like, because we know he has a connection to the League of Assassins and Shadows, so maybe it's something there. I mean, you also know that that's Deathstroke, Slade's on that island too, potentially, depending on how everything kind of played out. Once again, it just brings up the question, like, what are the differences? Like, we got some here and there, but we don't really know all the big differences. At the same time, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's a world that's not ours. It's kind of a piece to a much larger puzzle, so kind of getting caught up in all the finer details isn't really all that important right now. But regardless, I just thought that was so dope. And obviously saying, their goodbyes and everything, and even suggesting that Adrian becomes the Green Arrow instead of the Hood, because obviously the city needs a symbol, now. And kind of talking about the fact is of how it's not just Adrian, also having Laurel, how better off this city is because of her. And even she'd be like, wow, that's like the nicest thing you've ever said to me. So I thought that was neat. Kind of stopping that there, we cut to everything in the future. Obviously, Arrow team, new generation of Arrow, which is Team Arrow New Generation. You can't necessarily call it 2.0 because they've already kind of been through 2.0. This would actually technically be like 3.0. But obviously, William, Mia, Zoe, and Connor kind of working as a new Team Arrow, kind of handling things. Kind of blundered things to a certain extent, especially when the Deathstroke gang shows up. In particular, it's John Jr. Leading the charge. And so, because obviously it's the whole thing of Mia being reluctant to kind of she's kind of the wild card. She's kind of used to kind of handling things on her own. And, obviously, not really following Connor's lead, but he's a more tactician. It's like mirror images, and it's so crazy because it's like when you see Mia, obviously you're seeing Oliver. When you're seeing William, you're seeing Felicity, which is so interesting considering the fact this Felicity wasn't his actual biological mom, but a lot of who she was kind of rubbed off on him. Obviously, when you're seeing Connor, you're seeing John, and it's so interesting because when you see Zoe, you see both Dinah and Renee, so that's an interesting element in itself. But it's so interesting too because he's got mannerisms similar. William has mannerisms very similar to Felicity in the sense that he's like, man, no one ever listens to the tech guy. He's like, that's something like Felicity would definitely say. And so, it's like, hey, let's not let down our parents. Like, they set us forth to kind of be this next generation of heroes here in Star City, so we got to help out, So it's like, hey, let's follow Connor's plan for a little bit, which is interesting. Like seeing him with the little batons, they're like the stunner batons and everything. It's like he kind of went a little Nightwing on me. I was like, what's that? Maybe that's just his fighting style and stuff like that. But it just kind of made me think of Nightwing to a certain extent. I thought that was kind of pretty dope. But I don't know. I know I'm reading probably too much into it, but I just think it's kind of interesting. Which is also interesting considering the fact that it's in an alternate, reality based on what was there initially in season 1 of Legends of Tomorrow. He became the Green Arrow, so it's just interesting to think he's more Nightwingish / Black Canary to a certain extent. It's just interesting. But regardless of that, the plan didn't go well because it seems like John got away. I'm curious why, because he was like, oh, you're trying to save the city, that's not going to help, which obviously the parallels between that and obviously everything that's going down with Tommy in the present day and everything on Earth 2. It's just interesting that the fact is that the thing that caught me was John left Mia alive. Obviously he knows who they are because John was obviously he would, but it's maybe because he does, I mean, Connor was like, he knows who we are, so it's like, maybe that's why John left Mia alive. I felt like it would have been easier just to kill her. What they're necessarily got planned, obviously they're trying to take over the city and stuff like that, but is it just simply that or something more? There's obviously references to the fact of what Star City's like now that the walls are going down, what that means. Like some people pointing out, like, oh, crime rate is up, but in the grand scheme of things, since the walls are going down that's in the Glades if you want to get statistical about it, but in the grand scheme of things, crime is lower, and it's like, oh, the light has changed on vigilantes and stuff like that, which I'm curious to kind of circle back to, like, why vigilantes are kind of like, well, we kind of know where everything kind of landed in season 7, but beyond that, I'm curious, if that, how much of that carries over and carries through, but nevertheless, it was kind of neat kind of going back to present day. It's kind of interesting because I think the future stuff is probably going to be the smaller parts of the episode to it. Like I said, it depends on how the rest of the season shakes out. But I feel like the cutaways to the past, I feel like wasn't as half as I kind of would have expected. It does seem more in line with like the flashbacks in because obviously there were some episodes that were like way more future arc, obviously last season, and obviously like there's less episodes this season and whatnot. So I'm just curious to see how they end up dividing it up. Like I said, I think some episodes will probably be more future stuff than others because they've got a lot to kind of throw in at us, like the end of Arrow, which also ties into the Crisis thing and what this means for the future. Regardless, it was a sweet moment of Oliver kind of saying goodbye. It's like, he's there saying goodbye to his mom and everything, and it's like, oh, wait, things are going crazy. What's going on? Oh, yeah, that antimatter that we got introduced to in the Flash, yeah, it's devouring this world. It's like, wait, what? I mean, that's the question. Like, why is it eating this world so much faster than any other? Earth 3 seemed fine, but maybe that's something when we circle back to Arrow next. I mean, not Arrow. Well, not just Arrow, but the Flash next week. It's like, yo, like, these worlds are being devoured by this antimatter. So, and obviously I'm assuming whatever this dwarf star thing is important to that. So Laurel kind of jumped through the portal, which I'm curious, does that mean Adrian jumped through? Which is so sad because Oliver's got to watch his mom get like consumed. We see Renee and Dinah get like that, as well as Tommy, and it's like watching them die all over again. It's not the version of them, but it's like there was a version of Tommy. He was kind of shifting from a bad guy to a good guy, and just to know that that's gone. Hopefully, they can fix that when they potentially restore the worlds. I mean, I've picked up information because I'm unfamiliar with the Crisis thing, but I've learned what that means in the grand scheme of things for the multiverse. Now, whether they'll necessarily go down that route for the Arrowverse, I don't know, but we'll kind of see. Like I said, I don't want to spoil anything if you're not familiar. Like I said, I'm not familiar with the Crisis situation, but it's something I've picked up a little bit because other people, have talked about it with so much like Crisis, news has come out. But nevertheless, going through, and that's going back to Earth 1, and it's like that's how we end the episode. It's like, dude, are we going to like what? Like everything we saw in the trailers, I'm like, dude, I'm getting so excited to see where we play around in this giant ground that is the multiverse. Is he going to be traveling, like, is Oliver and Diggle or even Laurel going to be traveling to other worlds? It's actually kind of sad when you actually think about it because literally her entire world got eaten. What that necessarily means, I mean, to be fair, we don't know. We know her dad is going in this world, which to be fair, he's going in Earth 1 as well, but still. I'm so curious to find out, like, where's this all going to take us this season? Dude, this is nuts. The final season of Arrow. Like I said, it's kind of a bummer we literally only get 10 episodes this season, from my knowledge. But, no, definitely. And it's like, but at the same time, I'm still so excited. Dude, it's crazy to think that after all these years, this is the end. And obviously, like I said, the question for both Barry and Oliver, like, is the future set in stone or can you change it? It's been changed so many times before, but maybe there are just some finite things that just cannot be changed. And it's going to be interesting to see if Oliver and Barry's fate is one of those things that can't be changed. Can Diggle's fate be changed? I am so curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, because who knows, this antimatter thing doesn't bleed over to Earth 1. Maybe it just bleeds off to other Earths. Maybe certain Earths are getting hit before others. So either way, because I think even there was when Jay was kind of mapping everything, It seemed like he was referenced. It looked like he had referenced that some of the Earths had been kind of consumed by the antimatter. Maybe, maybe not. But like at the very least, he was keeping in touch with all of them. So now this kind of adds context that the antimatter isn't just sitting there; it's literally devouring worlds. So, like I said, I'm so interested to see where this ends up taking us going forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.